The World Future Society of South Africa is a policy think tank of the country's professionally qualified futurists. It's hosting a workshop this week under the theme, Taking Ownership of South Africa's Vision 2030. The workshop aims to constructively debate the draft plan recently released by the country's National Planning Commission. Let's head over to Cape Town. Merle O'Brien is Deputy Chairperson of the World Future Society of South Africa. She joins us now. Merle, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Lerato. Good evening.
Thank you. Okay, let's just deal with the basics of what the Vision 2030, the new development plan for South Africa. The key priority here is tackling unemployment, dealing with poverty, and handling this issue of social inequality. Those are the three core pillars. How are they going to do it?
I think firstly, let me begin by commending the National Planning Commission on putting together a wide environmental scanning exercise, pulling that together into what we believe is more of a wish list than a plan, but certainly a commendable exercise of where we'd like to see ourselves going, and at this stage, like I said, still very much a wish list.
Merle, key priorities for Trevor Manuel and his team are issues we know. It's unemployment, it's poverty, it's social inequality. For him, this is what ultimately needs to be dealt with in South Africa if we're to have the country envisioned in the Constitution and by our liberation leaders.
That's perfectly correct. We're looking at issues of how do we build a more socially inclusive society. There's around 5 pages in the document of poetics around what true and meaningful democracy should mean, what it would be like to live in a sustainable, crime-free society where we all have jobs. But the key issues for us is how are we actually going to be showing what is the mountain that we are going to need to climb in order to address those issues. And there we feel a lot more work needs to be done on the plan.
He's also talking about tackling unemployment from 25% to 14% by the year 2020. And one of the ways he's going to do this, job creation and dealing with education. Now, we already see the challenges in creating jobs. What about handling this colossal issue of education where 87% of South African schools are dysfunctional?
See, Lerato, there are a number of factors that co-produce, and when we want to shift society in a particular direction, we have to move all of those factors as co-producers along with us. So when we speak around creating jobs, we have to say how is the education system, or how will the education system capacitate those for future jobs. And as an example, we see in the plan a focus on mathematics, science and literacy, and yet a focus on the economy, on manufacturing. And we ask, how will we potentially reconcile that? Or will we be creating or skilling people for joblessness? I think that we're dealing with a near current reality of that at the moment. So we do need to take some steps to co-produce a more positive society.
On this note, I mean, they have made a recommendation which would be to subsidize any business that takes on unskilled labor, almost like what we're seeing with the Jobs Fund. Is Trevor Manuel telling us anything new? Is there any innovation here on dealing with these issues of inequality?
When we begin dealing with issues at the level of sort of tactically, when we begin to look at things at the level of indicators, without us not having consensus and alignment of the aligning us with an ethos and a commitment to move us not towards a wish list, but towards actual I don't want to say targets, but where we all understand, like I was saying, what is the mountain, then we're able to move to a better place. But if at the moment we are simply looking at a vast and extensive wish list, we're certainly not going to find our way clear. There's nothing new in the document. We spent the afternoon with Professor Philip Speth, who was the man who sat down with then President F.W. de Klerk and helped them see a 20-year future for South Africa and an apartheid being unsustainable, out of which heads of government met and began looking at a new South Africa, a new story for South Africa. We've got research reports going back the last 30 years in this country, which points to the very work that the NPC has produced and points to in the plan. So we don't really see anything new. What we're really looking for out of this is what's going to be the big idea, what is going to actually create the turnaround, what's going to shift the collective consciousness from one that's going towards the trajectory of a negative future into one that certainly can take us to a better place.
Before we deal with that consciousness, I still want to deal with the tangibles here. A resource-intensive economy is something we should focus less on, and like you said, a more environmentally conscious approach to doing business in South Africa. How feasible is that?
You see, for us to have a more environmentally sustainable approach, it means the rules of the game must change. So the rules of the game permitted business to pollute the economy, to perhaps not live as good neighbors with communities. And when government policies change the rules of the game, we co-create then business sustainability. I don't think we can settle for a either-and situation. We cannot both tolerate unsustainable practice and it's one of the issues that comes through in the document is finding this balance between a low carbon economy on the one hand, and on the other possibly having to secure an energy future which really takes us into a energy scenario that perhaps may not be the most green for the country.
All right, let's go back to the core, the subtext, the ethos you refer to, that this plan, however tangible, technical it may be, it has to get you and me thinking the same way. It has to get business and unions targeting the same goals. It has to have civil society and government operating on the same moral plane. What would he need to do to get us all there?
I don't think he needs to do anything. I think it's we that need to do something. You know, there's the big question around whose responsibility is this? And as the World Future Society, we recognize that there's a number of steps that perhaps in deepening our democracy needs to be taken to actually allow civil society, labor, business to rethink and then find ways to capacitate these sectors so that ownership and responsibility is taken for us to co-create the kind of society we want to be. I don't think this is about Minister Trevor Manuel telling us this is what we are going to be doing to make a better world for you. I think from here, there's five steps in futures work. The first is measurement work. And Minister Manuel and his team have done wonderful, commendable work on measuring and looking at the demographics and the economics and the environmental issues, and so deep scoping work. The next phase was diagnosis. The next phase is then the design work. So what is this plan looking like? And I think that's where we are now, because after the plan comes the down and dirty, roll up your sleeves, each and every person, let's get on with it and climb the mountain. And at that stage, we actually cannot have one of the stakeholders come along and say, but actually, I can't do this, or actually, this is not possible for me. So the time really to speak is now, before we lock in whatever this plan may then envisage us to achieve. And then naturally there'll be monitoring and evaluation along the way. And as futurists, we do certainly use issues, crisis, risk management tools to lock in certain futures, understanding that we are dealing with we call it a project as a project. So this collective project of what we imagine becomes our social project. And that's what we focus on doing. But it's a bit like building the monster with Frankenstein, because you don't really know with absolute certainty until he gets up on D-Day and starts to walk that you have built and pieced together a collective society that can function in the way that we envisage it will. So now each part of civil society needs to contribute parts to make the entire human body of this organization functional.
Okay, you've called us to action, Merle O'Brien. We hope to hear from you in the future. She's the Deputy Chair of the World Future Society, where they are deliberating on the National Development Plan recently unveiled by South Africa's Minister of National Planning and his fellow commissioners, a Vision 2030 for South Africa.